We can't hear you.
You guys are good to go.
Good morning.
There you go. Nice to see you.
Kevin, are you ready for us to get started?
You guys are good to go.
Oh, good. All right.
His voice is very clear.
Yeah. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Moore,
Here.
Councilwoman McNamara.
Here.
Councilman Iacilli.
Here.
Councilman Pell.
Here.
Councilman Martell.
Here.
All right. Well, then we're going to start this morning's work session with a presentation on new IA systems and legislation. We have quite a distinguished group with us here today. If you want to come forward, Professor Gobler, Fred Thiel, former assemblyman, is on Zoom. Walter DeWittiak, Water Quality Development Liaison for Stony Brook, Kevin McDonald, the Nature Conservancy, and Bob DeLuca, group for the East End. Dr. Gobler, I understand you have some slides you want to show us to begin.
I'm going to show a few slides, and then Walter's going to show a few slides, and then I think a little bit more discussion. Obviously, this is all for discussion, so I'm going to, like I said, I like standing because I feel like as a professor I'm used to standing and lecturing, but I don't want to be lecturing to you. I do want it to be a discussion, so interrupt me. And you've probably seen a fair bit of what I'm going to show before. It's not very long. But anyway, going to be talking about on-site wastewater and how that affects the environment and public health as well. And starting with the very basic concept that we're all familiar with, that the town of Southampton, everything is a watershed. So wherever the water's falling, anywhere in the entire town, it ends up somewhere. Peconic Estuary, Shinnecock Bay, Mauritius Bay, lakes, ponds, or the ocean. And all the activities on land affect what ends up in the groundwater, and then that affects, of course, both our drinking water source and what ends up in coastal waters as well, with septic systems being a big part of that. We know that this is for Suffolk County, but as the town of Southampton, similar trends that the population has grown, and with that we've seen the amount of nitrogen in our groundwater increase in concentration over time. And there's been many studies done during the past 15 years that have continually identified the fact that the two biggest sources of nitrogen from land to sea are fertilizer and wastewater, but predominantly it's wastewater, and specifically on-site wastewater. Almost everywhere in the town, probably more than 90% of the homes are not connected to sewage treatment plants. So we've got direct discharge into groundwater. The nitrogen that gets there is not reactive with anything in the ground and in the aquifers it moves through, and it then therefore discharges in the surface waters. And these are how the systems work. They're meant to drain the contents of those leaching pools directly into the groundwater. As you know, over the years, I've done a lot of studies of what's happening in surface waters. This map is, all of Long Island, and it's showing harmful algal blooms and hypoxia. You can see it's a lot, but I actually have one just for the town of Southampton waters that we just finished making. This is just from last summer, right? But it's representative of what we see most summers. So what you're seeing is just in the town of Southampton last year, just between the months of May and September, so not even the whole year, just really the summer months primarily, we had 11 different places where the oxygen levels got down to dangerous levels for marine life. And that had consequences. We had 4 different locations with fish kills because of those low oxygen levels. We had 10 different sites that in freshwater ponds and lakes that had these blue-green algae blooms, and 9 different sites with marine harmful algal blooms. So just briefly, what are harmful algal blooms? They occur in marine and fresh waters. It's when you have the overgrowth of algae. On the left, it's the type that can make toxins. On the right, it's the type that we just call ecosystem disruptive that can lead to fish kills or the death of other types of marine life. And we know that when you get more nitrogen into the water, those events become more intense and potentially more toxic. Just going to give two quick examples of those. In fresh water, we worry about these blue-green algae blooms. There's Lake Agawam in the heart of the village, contrasting strongly in color from the coastal ocean water. It's not a Gulf green, it's the actual lake, of course. And we know there are dangers associated with these blooms. They don't just look bad, but the organisms in there, in this case, microcystis, makes the toxin microcystin. And I can tell you, we've been monitoring Lake Agawam again this summer, and like in past years, the levels of microcystin right now are fairly high.
Are they more prevalent during the warmer months because of the temperature?
It's completely a summer phenomenon, so it emerges in May and then goes all the way through, typically sometimes almost through the fall, almost into winter. And we know these toxins are dangerous. For example, there's recently an event in Africa where endangered elephants were killed from drinking water that had these blue-green algae blooms in them. A more realistic setting for us is that we know that our pets, dogs, are vulnerable. There was a case in East Hampton where a dog died from drinking water from Georgia Pond. We've had incidences over the years for Mecox Bay, for dogs drinking the water, and just showing some studies here, for example, from the CDC, where they've called out hundreds of cases where dogs are drinking water with these toxins and getting sick. There's even now the concern that these toxins can be aerosolized and people can even be breathing them. And so in coastal areas, that's going to be a concern as well. And we know that these can be promoted by both nitrogen and phosphorus. People used to ignore the role of nitrogen, but this is a paper I published a few years back with some colleagues showing, you can see it says dual role, because it not just makes them more intense, but if you look at that toxin, there's the molecule, and you look at all those red circles, those are the nitrogen atoms. So you give the organism more nitrogen, it can make more of the toxin. In marine waters, we would be most concerned about alexandrium. It makes that compound saxitoxin on the upper right there. That's a neurotoxin. It's 1,000 times more potent than cyanide. It can get into shellfish because shellfish are filter feeders. They concentrate the water and therefore concentrate the toxin and can lead to something called paralytic shellfish poisoning. That's not the one I wanted to hit. In places like Alaska, which has a larger coastline than the entire rest of the U.S., this can be a very serious outcome, and it has been over the years. And the paralytic shellfish poisoning can be lethal. The organism is widespread on Long Island, widespread in the town of Southampton. And over the years, there's been many places on Long Island that have been closed to shellfishing because the toxin's getting into shellfish. And you look at the lower 4 locations there, that's all in the town of Southampton. In Sag Harbor, Shinnecock Bay, parts of Reeves Bay, for example, in Flanders Bay, Peconic River, and even in West Hampton. And just this year, for example, this spring, the entire western half of Shinnecock Bay was closed to shellfishing. And as I'm sure you all know, people like to go clamming, for example, at the Ponquag Bridge. I've done it myself, and it's really concerning because, hopefully everyone knew, but if they didn't, they could be at risk. And this particular event, we saw the second highest cell densities we've ever seen in Shinnecock Bay, going all the way back to 2008. And then again, we had an event in Moriches Bay in the eastern extent, and you can see in this region in Wemsnerburg in West Hampton. And again, we know there's a role for nitrogen here. This is a very simple experiment that we've done to control where we had no nutrients, then we had either nitrogen or phosphorus, and you can see a very strong response from nitrogen. And that's not surprising. We've studied this in the past. We've even identified that not only does nitrogen make the blooms more intense and more toxic, but it's specifically wastewater-derived nitrogen. So in this particular paper, highlighting the upper right, we used a specific technique to identify what type of nitrogen it is. It wasn't fertilizer-derived nitrogen. It was the on-site septic-derived nitrogen that was driving the blooms. And then the very last thing, I mentioned oxygen before. Oxygen is a critical parameter for all marine life. And the more nitrogen you get loading into the system, the more algal blooms you get. When they break down, that takes oxygen out of the system. And the DEC has very specific standards on oxygen. We never want to go below 3 milligrams per liter. And back to the map I showed before, we did have 11 sites that got below that level last year, and for 4 of those sites we had concurrent fish kills. So, gonna just leave it at that. Clearly, the on-site wastewater is a threat, not just the marine environment, but when you get these algal blooms that make toxins, this is a human health threat. So it's a public health issue as well. And I'm not going to talk about the septics from this point further. Walt will pick that up, but upgrading these septics from ones that discharge 100 milligrams per liter to ones that can get down to 19, maybe 10, maybe even lower, can make a tremendous difference. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Walt. I'm just going to talk about septics and on-site septics.
Just before you do, Dr. Gobler,
Yeah.
I did have a couple of questions
Yes, please.
on some of the items that you mentioned. You referenced Lake Agawam in this presentation. What is the level of the threat there? Especially as it pertains to the health and safety of wildlife and public health of people.
Yeah, I mean, it varies because the blooms go up and down. There's, many components. There's the nitrogen, there's the temperature, and then there's just the natural ecosystem dynamics. But, I mean, there have been levels where it's been dangerous. And we've seen fish kills also in Lake Agawam, for example. And so, there could be threats to pets. We've measured in the past. We've even measured in the carp there that the microcystin gets into the fish. And there had been a concern back in the day. There were not everybody, but there were some people maybe who were purposely trying to catch those fish.
I may be wrong because I thought that I recall that there were some discussions a few months ago, maybe a little longer, that there may have been observation of some enhancements to the broader health of the lake, but I could be incorrect on that.
Lake Agawam has gotten much better.
Okay.
There have been efforts over the years specifically to address the runoff into that lake.
Yeah.
It used to be that in some ways the village was plumbed to drain into the lake. It's still like that in some places, but a lot of that drainage has been diverted. So there have been improvements. It's not as bad as it's been, but it's still vulnerable to pretty intense and dangerous blooms.
Okay. And can you just specifically comment briefly on Shinnecock Bay and some of the observations there? What is the risk, again, there?
Yeah, in happy news, the risk that we had this spring has abated. Again, the Alexandrium is a seasonal event, so it comes on in the spring. It can't hack the high temperatures, and therefore we saw that closure that was initiated, I want to say in April, was lifted in June. So so now the shellfish are clean, and I would go. I haven't yet, but I would go and harvest and eat those shellfish because the DEC will not reopen the shellfish beds until they have 3 consecutive weeks of negative tests. I don't want to. Thankfully, we have the DEC doing a good job on shellfish management. But for sure, the western part of the bay, it takes a long time for the water to flush out. We talk about there's an idea of residence time in Shinnecock Bay. The eastern half of the bay, the water flushes in and out of the inlet, and most of that flushes on each day. That water is renewed for the most part. Some exceptions to.
And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Taylor Creek.
Yes.
But I believe that's right near Shinnecock Bay, leads into Shinnecock.
Yep.
And I think that's a particular body that needs remediation.
Yep.
I'm not sure if you're aware of that. I know that the Southampton Village Mayor, Mr. Menger, came to us asking for some help with remediation. I think that's something, I don't know if you can comment on that. If we were to aid in the remediation of that creek, that could help the broader health of Shinnecock Bay.
For sure. I mean, that creek is representative of the further you get from that ocean inlet, the more vulnerable the systems are going to be to the septics because it takes longer for the water to flush out. So Taylor Creek is a perfect example of that. It's very far from the inlet. It's enclosed, and it's vulnerable, therefore, to these different algal blooms and such.
But as we're having this conversation about IE systems and septics, it's basically because short of remediation, I mean, if you're going to continue to put the same into it over and over again, you're doing bioswales and you're trying to take out, the nitrogen from from properties and from fertilizers and stuff, if you're just going to continue to not upgrade the septics, you could do all the remediation in the world you want. You're just going to continue
Exactly. The ultimate source are the septics. So, there are, if your focus is nitrogen, that is the thing that's got to be addressed. So, good point. Yeah.
I'm just curious about, so I know Southampton Village is preparing to start with the algae harvester that they acquired.
Yes.
What impact do you foresee that to have on the conditions?
I think that's going to be useful for addressing what I would call the legacy nitrogen. So the thing I often think about, or often say, when you think about a place like Lake Agawam, Long Island was formed 10,000 years ago, and that Lake Agawam was a salt pond that was dug out by a glacier 10,000 years ago that used to be just sugar sand all the way to the bottom. There are now places where there's 10 feet of mud. That represents the accumulation of a lot of nutrients. So the harvester will play a role in actively removing some of that, but again, you'll still have the wastewater nitrogen coming in from septics.
We have to get at the source.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good morning, Supervisor Moore, members of the town board. Thank you for having me. My name is Walter DeWittiak. I am now with the Stony Brook University New York Center for Clean Water Technology. Prior to that, I was fortunate to have a 36-year career with Suffolk County. I know and worked with many of you during that tenure. It was always a pleasure, and it continues to be. I was chief engineer for 8 years and then director of environmental quality for my last 14 years, and I just retired this past year. And here I am again. It's good to be here. I oversaw about a half dozen major program units. The only one I'm here to talk about today is wastewater. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Feel free to interrupt along the way. But I wanted to say that I'm not here as an official spokesman of Suffolk County. I just want to make that clear. I'm pretty much a wastewater historian here. I talk a lot, but I'm happy to have people listen. They told me to keep it short. I will. But I'm going to give you the background of wastewater. Where we are in terms of the sub-watersheds wastewater plan, which was the last major plan that I oversaw during my tenure, and what that means for the county and for Southampton moving forward. So the short story of what happened in the Nixon administration back in 1973, Suffolk County required that the previously approved technology of a cesspool have a septic tank in front of it. That happened in 1973. The plan back then during the 208 plan, and I was around in the health department in the 1980s when the 208 plan was first implemented, that's pretty much considered the first modern blueprint of environmental management subsequent to the Clean Water Act in Suffolk County. The plan back then was to sewer the county from the Nassau County line pretty much to Orient and Montauk. Those plans are still somewhere in my old office from the late 60s, early 70s, and the 208 plan relied on the sewering to address the legacy pollution. Two things happened. The Southwest Sewer District was both a success and a challenge in that there were problems associated with it that I'm not going to go to in detail, but it kind of gave major sewering projects a black eye for a bunch of years. The other thing that happened was in the 1980s, these sewering projects, which were funded something like 90%, were funded 0% by the federal government because the federal construction grants program was terminated. There were probably dozens of sewer proposal plans on the books at the time, virtually none of which were built because the funding all dried up and sewering has become even more cost prohibitive. Putting in an IA system is something like $30,000. Sewering a home is something like $100,000 to $150,000. Even though the health department loved sewering, we realized that it was not a solution countywide. Needed to be done selectively in hamlet settings where it could help economic development as well as environmental protection. But up and down the eastern seaboard, as I'll talk about in a moment, IA systems became the solution for diffuse septic pollution for which there hadn't previously been a solution. So in terms of unsewered areas, which is most of Southampton, fortunately, new development, we had what we call mixed success. We met the drinking water standard of 10 milligrams per liter. Article 6 of the sanitary code shoots for 4 to 6 milligrams per liter. Dr. Gobler was a real leader in illuminating the fact that this was not nearly enough for surface water. Surface waters need to be an order of magnitude or less. below that 4 to 6 milligrams per liter. So the health department considered that it did a good job in terms of the drinking water standard. But in general, nobody owned the diffuse non-point source problem. So Clean Water Act doesn't address on-site septics generally. State DEC exempts them. State Health Department regulates them for health reasons, which is delegated to the local health department. But it was a lot of finger pointing in terms of who should do what about these systems and how, and not much was really done for 40 years. I call it the wastewater renaissance in 2014. A few things happened. My colleague Sarah Lansdale made a bunch of us get into a very tight, very old county van and drive up and down the eastern seaboard for a week. And this was probably, for me, the single most important turning point in septic history, and that a bunch of folks from a bunch of county departments got to spend hours with these folks, speaking to them, and actually opening up systems and looking at them. And we learned an awful lot from this trip. So Massachusetts had by far the best developed technology and approval system, but they have probably the fewest because they have a series of towns that control the health code, not a county like Suffolk County. So even though the Cape Cod program, the commission, has done some great work and they made progress, right now they have far fewer IA systems than we have here in Suffolk County. Rhode Island had to embrace advanced treatment because of their coastal development rules. They probably had the best regulation and in-the-ground models. Maryland had a grant program that the county partially modeled this program against. So that septic tour laid the groundwork for everything that followed. That graphic there is from the Comprehensive Water Resources Management Plan, and that shows nitrogen trends. The upper glacial aquifer increased steadily by about 40% in the 30-year time period that we looked at, and that's the pollution that bleeds down to the Magathy below it, which went up by 90%. So we all hope that we see sort of an asymptotic reduction in the rate of increase, but the nitrogen from septics was still steadily bleeding down and not really getting any better, which was really alarming. At the same time, the state DEC adopted the Nitrogen Action Plan, which gave resources, money, and authority to Suffolk County to finally tackle this problem. The county health department hired a bunch of people. We made a bunch of code changes. Article 19 is the new one that established what's called a responsible management entity. Before 2016, it was a one and done with the health department. You came in for your permit. You got one approval. There was nothing that happened after that. If your cesspool or septic system failed, you can just put it in an overflow ring. So there was a perpetuation of the pollution with no end in sight. And basically, this responsible management entity gave the county the authority to approve the IA systems, as well as the operation, maintenance, and monitoring that has to happen down the road with these systems. So to my knowledge, this is the only county in the country, not only in the Northeast, that has this authority. In all those other jurisdictions, this is done at the state level. The state still approves all of the county actions on a case-by-case basis, but essentially the authority has been delegated. We started with the septic demo program, which invited installers to come and donate a system for observation. This has blossomed into an approval process with experimental, then pilot, then provisional, then general use. Provisional is the one where it can be used without any restrictions as long as it moves forward in a satisfactory manner. And we have about a half dozen of those systems that are approved. The Stony Brook lined NRB is one of those systems. The wood chip box NRB is also another promising system that's going to be coming into that mill very shortly, and a bunch of other systems as well. So the program has progressed nicely. The systems are performing very well. We use an estimate of about 70 parts per million nitrogen going into these systems. Dr. Gobler accurately observed that in many of these, we're seeing 90 to 100 because of low water use, low flow plumbing, coupled with high nitrogen inputs to these systems. These systems are pretty consistently getting down to about 15. The nitrogen removing biofilter of Stony Brook so far is the best performing one in terms of getting under 10. And it also removes pharmaceuticals and personal care products, which has not been observed yet in other systems, although we still continue to test those. So a lot of progress made. The grant programs that were established basically have a three-way funding stream. The Suffolk County Septic Improvement Program, affectionately known as the SIP, used 0.25% sales tax monies that were accumulated for a number of years. A percentage of that was always set up for upgrades. They were not approvable until around 2016, so that grant program was established. New York State essentially matched it with the septic system replacement program. And here in Southampton, you're fortunate to have the Community Preservation Fund, which makes up the difference, because even with those two grant program funds, it was not covering the full cost of installs, particularly in high-cost areas like Southampton. So now, by and large, most folks that I run across have their system substantially entirely funded. It's a green system. You can flush, you can shower, you're protecting the environment, you're improving the infrastructure of your home. It's really a win-win on all fronts. We did a few other things, something called bad grandfathering. There were a couple examples here on the East End. There was a policy set where once the health department gave you a flow essentially attached to the land in perpetuity, even though you may change a use or rebuild the structure, that may not make sense, but that was a policy that was set a long time ago. And we were advised by the law department that in order to change it, we should change the code, which we did. So we call it bad grandfathering. If you have the flow, you're entitled to keep it. Nobody's going to come in and make you change it. But if you put it in a new building or a totally different use that increases the flow, you got to have conforming wastewater infrastructure. So that bad grandfathering rule was adopted. And what we call the cesspool phase out was adopted in 2019. So if you have a cesspool and it really needs to be replaced, you can't put in another cesspool next to it. You at least have to put in a septic tank. And we're heavily promoting people to go with an advanced system, which is essentially better technology, which is funded up front at no cost. Yes, Councilperson Iazilli?
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you for your close attention to the bad grandfathering area. I think that that's really critical, and it's been really critical when we're dealing with various projects and developments, and when people fear that it perhaps may go outside the scope and size and could affect the environment. Your attention, very close attention to this has been very helpful for us, and I just want to express my gratitude for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And again, I'm not with the county anymore, but worked with a bunch of colleagues who did a great job on this, so we appreciate those thoughts. The IAs became a requirement for new construction. A couple of things happened. The Appendix A systems, which are small package plants, became more flexible. Instead of a 15,000 gallon per day limit, you can now go up to 30,000 gallons per day. And separation distances, to be consistent with other jurisdictions, were relaxed. So if you have a commercial type setting, you can fit in treatment more easily with the Appendix A at a higher flow. So that was kind of a win-win for the environment as well as people who needed it. IAs were also required for all new construction going back to 2020. So a number of the IA systems that have gone in have been related to that requirement. So this brings us to the Subwatersheds Wastewater Plan. I mentioned Sarah Lansdale, who was a leader in all this. I also want to give credit to Ken Ziegel. I sort of helped give birth to this plan in terms of designing, scoping, and getting support for it. Ken Ziegel was the guy that did the day-to-day project management on this and did a great job in divvying up 191 different subwatersheds throughout the county. And this is the first time that we ever had an integrated model of groundwater and all the estuary systems looked at holistically. The estuary programs, which I'm not going to talk about, came in the middle. There's 3 of them. They did a great job, but in terms of total maximum daily load solutions, they honestly failed because nobody had jurisdiction over the non-point source ends. Neither the feds nor the state could compel any of these septic upgrades, and the solutions that needed to happen for non-point sources never happened. So this plan sets a framework for a tiered upgrade approach. There's about 350,000, I'm rounding off, septic systems in Suffolk County. Over 1 million people are unsewered in the county, putting their waste directly into the aquifer that we drink from that goes to our surface waters. We have 700 public supply wells, about 100,000 people on over 30,000 private wells. If you tried to design a system that was more difficult to manage, I doubt you could do it. Nobody knew what was ahead back when this island was developed, and now we have these challenges to deal with. So the top priority areas are going to be met. This is a good news. Going into the study, we didn't even know whether it would matter. So we used the best science and the best partners to come up with the plan that everybody agreed upon. And what we found is that within about a decade, we can arrest and reverse this trend of worsening water quality. So these harmful algal blooms that Dr. Gobler is showing you, we're hoping that we're all going to be here in this room 10 years from now saying, geez, they've all gotten a lot better. And if we stick to this course, they will get a lot better. And in 30 years, the water quality standards will be attained in most areas for most criteria. Not all will be 100% every place at all times, but it's going to be a major, major improvement, and it's really going to fix a longstanding problem that's affected the environment and the economy. In 2024, the voters resoundingly approved a wastewater district, first ever in Suffolk County, countywide, dealing with sewers as well as IAs and an 1/8% sales tax. These are numbers from when I was still in the county. The initial projections, they keep being fine-tuned. Jennifer Youngster's the county executive, who's the head of the Water Quality Restoration Trust Fund. But back then, we projected that the 1/8% sales tax would produce somewhere north of $3 billion over 35 years. Now this funding is shared with sewers as well as IAs, but the good news is the county's moving other funding from other 1/4% plus into this to make it even bigger. And this trust fund board will be working on a plan to implement this moving forward. So where are we with IAs? Currently, we have 6,500 plus of these systems installed in the countywide. In a few short years, about 2,500 of those have been voluntary. About 4,000 have been new construction. Southampton leads the county, which is good news for everybody here. About 2,300 of these systems in Southampton and 1,700 in East Hampton. Almost 2/3 of the county total IAs are on the South Fork, which is good news for the South Fork. I think Brookhaven has about 800, which is the next runner-up, but then the numbers go down from there. So we're hoping to see all those numbers increase countywide with the district and the plan in place and the funding. The county grant provides $15,000 now. It was increased from 10. The SSRP New York State grant provides $10,000. There's a proposal on the table to increase it to $25,000. I don't believe it's been approved yet, but hopefully it will be. And the town CPF, as per website, has a possible LMI incentive, and the baseline grant can run from $20,000 to $25,000. And this can cover a cost of a whole system without much trouble in almost all places, which is great news, particularly for Southampton. The county program has been historically oversubscribed. It was designed to run at about 500 to 1,000 grants a year. Before the district, what it's been doing is funding catastrophic failures in priority areas because there's been so much demand. Last time I checked, there was a wait list of people over 1,000 countywide that were interested, but they were either not catastrophic or not in a priority area or both. These are people that will hopefully be funded, and I understand that with the district, they're starting to chip into that group, which is great news as well. So just to kind of get a feeling for what the numbers are, as per the subwatersheds wastewater plan, and again, I'm not speaking to county policy, which is being developed now, but under the subwatersheds wastewater plan, which was basically a straw proposal of what implementation might look like, we were talking about 1,000 retrofits a year as a baseline, which would be this year is an order of magnitude goal. The first priority for the county was to address all failures, particularly in priority areas, but ideally countywide. We thought that number would jump from about 1,000 to 3,000 based on industry records and discussions. And the next threshold to attack would be the property transfer plan, whereas there'd be some way to support the property transfers, and the goal would jump from 3,000 to 6,000. So you see that the goal was to triple the rate of installs within a year and then double it again within 2 years of implementation. But this is phase 2, which is a 30-year plan for implementation, and this kind of shows you, I don't have it zoomed into Southampton, but everybody knows where they are, and you can see that on the north side of Southampton, what you're looking at there along Great Peconic and Little Peconic Bays, the purple area is really the 0 to 2 year travel time, which is a narrow band. You're talking maybe 2,000 feet from shoreline. Those very near shore parcels, which are a concern with respect to potential pathogen loading and the shortest unmitigated nutrient loading. Those are the ones that you want to attack countywide first. Along the south shore, those are called priority 1 bodies. It was a complicated evaluation of flushing time coupled with pollution loads and impact to get the most sensitive areas who needed help the most. And those purple areas are priority area 1. So countywide, roughly the number of septics in those areas is about half. That's 180,000 number out of that 350,000 number. So the problem with timing here is that the county funding is program limited. So first, the 0 to 2 year travel time comes, then the priority area 1. The property transfer program was assumed to come in in 2027, a couple of years away for the 0 to 2 year travel time, and then in 15 years, it would expand to the priority area 1. And I think everybody in this room would agree that we'd want to address all of priority area 1 as soon as possible, not starting in 50 years and getting progress in 30. So the message, I think, is pretty clear. Southampton is very fortunate to have these CPF resources. If there's some sort of funding program set up to support property transfer based on the numbers I showed you, and these are order of magnitude first cut numbers, but I think that they're pretty realistic for purposes of discussion. The rate of recovery roughly doubles pretty much immediately for the environment. One point that the county legislature was always interested in, and I'm sure everybody here is too, every property transfer is an opportunity. It may happen every 3 years, it may happen every 30 years, but this is a point where you want to get something done so it's done now and not maybe never. So getting things done earlier helps you avoid those missed opportunities. And again, rather than wait 15 years to tackle your priority areas, you start almost immediately and accelerate the improvement in those areas. So that I appreciate you bearing with me. That was probably longer than the 5 minutes I hoped for, but that's what I do at my age.
Thank you.
Thanks, Walter. That was great.
Any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
Well, it's important for us to have the background so that we can have an intelligent discussion with you.
So I have the pleasure of following Walt and Chris, who are rock stars in their own field. And it occurred to me as we were sitting here with Fred on the Zoom, some of these people are the equivalent of Murderers Row, if it was a baseball team, in their expertise, breadth of knowledge, and duration in the policy arena around water quality and water quality restoration. And our principal message is that between Dr. Goebel laying out what the problem is, we have a problem, we have to do something about it. There's no dispute by just about anybody that that's the case. And Walt just gave us the rundown on sort of where we are. And if you step back, for those of us that were involved in this from the beginning, which was sometime, late 2007 and 2008, it was a preposterously impossible undertaking. And 14, 15, 16 years later, we're sitting here ridiculously to the point where just about everything we had to do over that period of time came together. And largely because of the leadership of these guys, and especially Fred on the Zoom. So what happened? In 2016, the public was asked in the 5 East End towns to extend the Community Preservation Fund and add a new category to finance water quality improvements. That was still emerging in only 2016. 2017, the county establishes its first alternative on-site waste disposal system that's different than what had happened for the last 100 years. The first time the county was saying, we're not going to do what the Romans did. We're going to treat our waste better and improve water quality. In 2023, the state legislature puts a ballot measure up for a state bond act statewide. It passed close to 70%. In Suffolk County, it passed at 65%. I suspect in the town of Southampton, it passed even higher. And then last year, there was a major ballot initiative that creates the Water Quality Restoration Act. It passes 72% countywide. So each time you ask the public, how concerned are you about water quality and should we do something about it? They say, yes, we're so concerned. We're going to vote yes for this. We're going to vote yes to create a taxing structure upon which you should now implement the strategies necessary to improve water quality, right? So that's sort of the setting. And the supervisor and I serve on a relatively new entity at the county level. Compliments of our good friend Fred in his last year in the ledge passed what I had been involved in impossible undertakings in the past, passing the Community Preservation Fund almost 30 years ago. And I thought that was the hardest thing I would ever do in my life, and it was until we did this, and this was worse. So that we're here with all the pieces together with a state, local, county, and even federal contribution to water quality improvements in the form of investing in infrastructure is quite miraculous. So our appeal to you guys now with we know this is a very friendly audience for this message, and we look forward to working with you about how do you scale up? Now that all the pieces are in place finally, how do you scale up a very aggressive program in the town, coordinated with the county that you and I were at a discussion yesterday about, working with the state legislature just passed a bill, the governor is expected to sign it. Right now, the state finances 50% of the septic replacements, and the county and the towns sometimes split the difference for the other 50. The governor is expected to sign this bill that her department put in that got passed. That ratio changes 75% to the state, 25% to the local level. Big deal, right? And then you go, well, gee, is this just a ridiculous coincidence? Or, to steal a line from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, I love it when a strategy comes together or when a plan comes together, right? So our pitch to you folks, and this is the discussion we want to have after Bob and Fred, is could we put together a working group whereby some of all the information that's been acquired and lessons learned from other places, can we think about accelerating the program in the town, the biggest town that the rest of the East End region will follow after we do a little bit better, and we accelerate all this? Because here's the thing, the tendency, and you guys know this, the tendency is to sometimes get distracted by other things because they seem kind of cool and they're interesting. But there's no substitute, none. There's no substitute for getting the pollution load out of the environment. You have to get it out of the groundwater, and that's how you get it out of our bays and harbors. And if we just do what's kind of boring and a little difficult, but necessary, we win. And then the public can say to some of us who might still be here, thank you for doing what we asked you to do 3 times in the last 9 years. So that's essentially our pitch and the conversation that we want to have. And we have a few ideas. They're not set in stone, and we know they can be improved upon. And we would enjoy that conversation with you. I think I did that right, Bob, so you're up.
Okay.
Has ideas?
I never have any ideas.
Bob's got no ideas. No, I'm only kidding.
I'm going to try to be mercifully brief. Just a couple of thoughts from all of this. Obviously, thanks to all of my colleagues here who have done yeoman's work on this for the last decade. Thanks to all of you for having us here and the work that you've done. 2 things come to mind. One is that, what the voters told us in November was we're prepared to reach into our pockets and fund something that you all say is going to work. And it's going to fix water quality in this county, and we're going to get it right. And these are tough times. It's not easy for people to vote for stuff like that. And what happens now is that everybody waits to see what's going to come of that. Now, either we sort of wait around for the process to limp along, or somebody goes first to take the lead. And for many years, and Kevin, you'll appreciate this, there was always, whether East Hampton or Southampton or somebody was going to go first on so many of these different environmental initiatives. And Southampton is already running ahead here with the number of systems that are in the ground, with the available funding to help people make those investments. And so I think one of the reasons that we're here is to say, let's take the biggest town in the East End, let's go first. And how do we get there? How do we do it seamlessly? How do we make that investment pay off for people? And I guess the final thought is this: if we don't get moving on this money that's now available, we all know somebody's going to come for it, and it won't be us. Now, maybe they don't get it right away, but it just always happens. And if you're on that trustees board, you know that there are lots of sewer projects that people want up west, and people are going to decide that maybe all this money shouldn't go out. And we're going to go back to the same debate we had 5 years ago. But I think we're past all of that, and I'm just here to say whatever we can do to help the town go first and go hard, let's do that. Let's have that discussion.
Fred, did you want to go now, or did you want to go after some discussion?
No, let me go now, and then we can go to discussion. And it's always nice to be last, right? Everything has been said, but not by everybody, right? So, and I'm not here because I was actually there when Long Island was formed 10,000 years ago. So hopefully I was to contribute to this, but. You heard, very articulately from everybody. The problem is nitrogen. Septic waste, sewage is the primary cause of that. There's a plan to deal with it, the subwatershed plan. There's a solution in IA systems. And so far, over the last 10 years, we've taken the baby steps that are necessary to begin that process. And what wasn't said is yes, throughout the county of Suffolk, 6,500 of these IA systems have been installed, over 2,300 of them in Southampton, but that's 6,500 out of 360,000. And if we only do 1,000 a year, that's a few centuries from now before we would finish the job. So, the major impediment to this has been money. As County Executive Ed Romaine is fond of saying, all decisions of government are decisions of money. And, the major impediment to scaling up and accelerating this program was the lack of money. And as you've heard the other speakers say, through a variety of actions, whether it's been the State Bond Act or the State Water Quality Improvement Infrastructure Fund, or the enactment of the Suffolk County Water Quality Improvement Program with the 0.125% sales tax, it's going to generate somewhere, in the neighborhood of $3 to $4 billion. 50% of that money is for IA systems, or it's the Community Preservation Fund. There is now money available to really upscale and really accelerate this program. And the question is how to best do that. And there's a lot of alternatives that are out there. In the implementation of this, you want to make sure that you're not putting an undue burden on the real estate market. When you talk about transfers, which really is the engine of the East End economy. You don't want to have an adverse impact on other efforts with regard to affordable housing because of the cost of IA systems. But it all needs to get done, and it needs to be accelerated. And as Kevin mentioned, there are different ideas and alternatives and thoughts about how to accelerate that. But the best way to approach this is to put together a working group, get all the stakeholders in a room, and come up with a plan that makes sense to attack the problem, implement the plan, and accelerate this program so that we're talking about major improvements to water quality in 20 and 30 years, and not major improvements in 200 to 300 years. So, in conclusion, the ask is we want to work with the town board and work together to come up with that solution. And there's plenty of good ideas out there. We just have to find the right balance that gets this done and gets it done in an efficient and cost-effective way. Thanks.
Thank you, Fred.
So a couple of the ideas, that have been discussed both at the county level and even, at the town level. And let me also, I really want to underscore this point. We fully understand that something that was really very new needed to have patience and time. And we're 7 and 8 years later, and somebody might say, okay, that's patient, certainly time, and now all the pieces are in place. So this is without fault. We're not blaming anybody. This is not about, this doesn't come from a place of finger wagging. Not that I know none of you have ever had a meeting where you had finger waving at you, right? So that's not our message, right? So if some simpler things were done, and I do think we can go into some detail here, but there really is, this is a question of a working group and a phased-in strategy about what do you do next, what do we do this year, what do we do next year and the year after, knowing there are other pieces moving that are synergistically connected to this. And some of them include, right now the town has a priority area and an area that's not necessarily a priority. Maybe the whole town should be a priority in an eligibility area.
We're working on that.
Right. So that's one, and I know that, right? Because everybody's thinking this way, but we all know this too, and I know you're all subject to this. The crisis of the day always eats your best plans that you had for today, tomorrow, and the next day, right? So to the extent that any of us can be helpful there, we want to be. But removing the priority, non-priority area, that's good.
Yeah, because eventually it's all going to get there, right? So.
Well, correct, right? Especially in small places, relatively small, like the East End, and the thin strips of land that drain both, to all our bays and harbors, and we really have a problem.
And there's a lot of wetlands, freshwater wetlands inside what people don't even realize. What are affected.
So there's every reason to do this. The question is, well, how, and then how do you do it? And then the other thing is boring and terrible things such as, I use that term extremely flippantly, but you probably need more staff, probably need to program a little more money, probably need to hustle a bit to get more money from the state. But I have to say, they're increasing their grants to Suffolk County. Suffolk County has its own money. They're increasing the ratio of their financing. A town such as this that has its own dedicated funding stream, New York State people that are administering this program are saying there's no place else like Suffolk County anywhere in the state that's doing this level of work in an integrated fashion across towns and villages and counties working with the state. No place else. In fact, there's other places of the country, in Florida, Hawaii, that are calling here saying, how did this all come together? It's remarkable. So we want to continue the remarkable accomplishment and the achievement and think about what else can be done in an integrated strategy between, something this simple. There's two instances where people really have the capacity to plan a septic system upgrade. And that's the hardest part. You're doing one lot at a time. When your septic system fails, it's really interesting to get somebody's attention, right? Because they're having a crisis. When somebody comes into the building inspector's office because they want to do a project on their property and they're going to have an impact on it, that's also a very good time to say, have you thought about availing yourself to this program and getting a grant if you're eligible for one? And if you're doing new construction and major renovation, you got to dig a hole up anyway. You got to put something in the ground. Putting a new system in compared to the old systems, the difference in cost isn't that great anyway, and you're spending all this money for these other improvements.
Although that's required anyway, so we wouldn't give grant money for that.
Absolutely, and you shouldn't, right? Because if you're spending that kind of money for a new structure, the difference in price, it's not equivalent. What makes this replacement program expensive is you have to go to somebody's house. If they don't have a failure, they're reasonably content with how things are, and you have to dig something up and you have to put it back. It's involved, right? So if we could look at partnering with the county on some of its initiatives, it doesn't allow grandfathering so much anymore, and I thank Walt for his leadership on that with other folks at the health department. And then if you're having a transfer consideration, is it possible to think about asking people, this was Fred's terrific idea, asking people to sign an acknowledgement when they file their deed and they have to sign off the CPF form that I'm acknowledging that, I need to change my septic system if I don't already have one, that there's grants available for this program under certain circumstances, and you give them an added incentive for a 2 or 3 year period to change their system out because, and we actually thought about this because this has been kicked around for a while. People going, well, how do you is there a way to accelerate change out systems at point of sale? And nobody wants to be in the middle of a transaction that says, I was just about to close and you're telling me I have to get a septic system replaced. So nobody's saying that, even though I just said nobody's saying that. I hope nobody repeats it that I said it, right? So that's one. Two is, well, what would it mean to incentivize that? So then if somebody buys a house and they're thinking about doing an improvement to the property anyway, that's terrific time to say, if you're doing an improvement, you should think about doing the septic system over as well. And if you put that, in some kind of, affirmation or a covenant when they file their deed that says you really need to change this thing out. In Rhode Island, what the state legislature did was they basically said 2 or 3 years from some point in the future, you can't have these things at all anywhere. So if you come in to any building permit in Rhode Island for anything, you have to do the upgrade at that time, right? So there may come a time when that's the case, and you can all think back to
Very
this.
aggressive.
I'm sorry?
That way is very aggressive and get it done.
Yeah, it is. And listen, New England does some things right, and we learned from what they did right and what we thought we would need to do here to make that work. We created, they had a program that started a heavy regulatory program. Everybody rebelled. It didn't go so good. And because we thought we should learn from that, we all thought it would be much smarter to have an incentive-based program first, and then start the program that way. And it's been much better received, and the public has supported it consistently in every opportunity where we've asked, right?
You're saying that the new owner signs an affidavit that within the next 2 or 3 years, they'll replace the system. And then if they don't, the building department wouldn't issue any further permits
without
for work.
without a change out, right? So that, and you can ask for an extension if somebody says, "Listen, I'm not ready to do the improvement, but I want to do the improvement, and I got a hang up, I have a health emergency, So it's a reasonableness test, right? We're not saying it should be, a deadline that is so rigid that it doesn't reflect reality. But the idea is, what we're trying to avoid is if somebody makes an improvement and then they go, "Oh, I wish I knew about this program. I just did an improvement last year and I didn't, I didn't have to do it. I didn't do it. Now I understand. I wished I had." Right? So the idea is to catch people where they're at a point in their life where they're making a decision that maximizes the ease of their participation in changing out the old system to the new.
So could I just make a comment? So I think first and foremost, absolutely real estate transfers we have to look at. That has to be a part of the picture here. But just from a more global perspective on this, in my experience working with constituents, they're ready to go. They want to do this. And I think one of the challenges, and I know, Kevin, we've talked about this a little bit. I know, Dr. Goldberg, you've been working with Dr. Novak, and I appreciate all that work. And I know PEP is working on outreach. I think one of the findings is that they're ready to go. They want to do this work. They want to upgrade their systems. When they see that they are qualified for the fundings, in some cases they have to put forward their own cash, and they may not have that cash ready to go. And that's sort of a hurdle for them to move forward.
So let me just clarify. Right now, the way the program is working, and let me also really make this clear, the county is looking at how they're going to be modifying their program going forward because of all the changes. The state is looking for how they would modify the program. The state legislature already is ready to, and if the governor signs it, which is expected, that will change their contribution. So I think everything is being freshly reviewed now, right? But one of the things that the county did, I think, really smartly was you don't have to lay the money out. The only thing that right now people are obligated to cover is the hiring the engineer at the beginning of the process. And part of that thinking was, and at the time was, if people are serious about doing this, they have to make some investment in what they can. Now, I'll agree with you. There may be instances where someone really has a compelling need, but they don't have the cash and they want to do it. I think there's an opportunity to think about should that be made easier, and should that be made with a larger contribution.
Right. Well, if the task here is to try to make this as easy as possible for people and make this as widespread as possible, especially for folks who are working class and may not be able to put up 20 grand right away, I think we need to try to find ways. If we're going to establish a working group, we should find ways within the policy structure to give out that money more easily to folks who can put that in the ground. Yep. And maybe that requires that if we do establish a working group, we do include county representation as well.
But just to clarify, are you saying that if somebody's putting in the system, they don't pay the contractor, the county pays and the town
The way the
pays?
system is, the way the whole program is set up at the state and the county level, and I hope at the town level, is the contractor gets paid directly. We specifically wanted to avoid anybody having to lay out $25,000 or $30,000 and then wait to get reimbursed, right? And so Walt was there when it was happening. So it was, you make direct payment to the contractor, and the county has a system whereby, certain contractors are eligible to participate in the program. They have everything vetted, the W-9s there, they get paid that way. Contractors, in fairness to some of my contractor friends that have said sometimes they would like to get paid a little faster than they get paid.
Remember we had that trouble with the contractors wasn't getting paid, and we
Yeah.
sat over that.
So that has to be improved also, right? So it's a full suite of, the macro message is we have all the pieces together that we've been trying to get together for the last 12 to 15 years. It's now time to imagine, how do we do this in the best way possible, and what would that take? Without casting blame or fault on anybody, it's just about, we have the pieces, let's get it done. How do we do it the best way possible?
So do you have to hire an engineer, or is there a way to?
Sadly, it's way in the weeds, but we tried to simplify that process, and Walt's the engineer. He can't help himself right now.
No, what I'm going to say is that the county has worked on streamlining this. So if you have a catastrophic failure that needs immediate replacement, rather than have an engineer come do a whole new survey, a whole new plan, a whole new design,
That
wait
is
weeks for an
terrific.
approval, it's a streamlined program. So it's less expensive because the engineer doesn't have to draw everything up and submit it. All he's got to do is a conceptual sketch and sort of a sketch of an as-built certifying that the thing has been built in accordance substantially with standards. So that's one improvement, and there's certainly room for more.
So couldn't we have the engineers just do a conceptual sketch for everyone?
Not for new construction, based on the way that the sanitary code is interpreted for new construction, and there's some more degrees of freedom with respect to retrofits and pre-existing improvements, particularly in emergency situations. But it's something that can be talked about. Sure.
But these are the types of things, could there be a time when there's a GIS system electronically and this can all be done in real time? I have to say the emergency catastrophic failure process that Walt and others put together is terrific, and I had the incident to prove it, from the day everything literally blew up to the replacement happened, it was 4 days, which is frankly unheard of. And that's for new technology. It was just terrific. And other people have said the same thing. And again, why is that happening? Why are they focusing there? Because you have somebody's really undivided attention to fix their problem. And you're not going to ask somebody right after they dig their lawn up with an old technology that they paid for, then say, oh, by the way, would you like to participate in this grant program to change it out? They're going to go, why? I don't want 2 holes in my lawn. I don't want to do this again. But anyway, back on sort of what our fix is. These are the conversations that we could have going deep into some of these things, and having conversation in real time with folks in the health department, with the county execs, principal person, Jennifer Youngst, on this, and just saying, look, let's see if we can literally pilot and say, look, what works well, what can we adjust, right? We're learning as we're doing, but we're doing better. And that's sort of is the concept where we're all coming from.
There's no doubt the customer service piece has got to be, if you want people to do this, it's got to work smoothly, it's got to work well. And we talk to people who call up with those issues.
If we get the contractors on board with us, they'll go after you. They'll go after. They'll go after. It's like this houses I go by where I know the septic system is failing because the guy has tops over it. The guy's pumping into the weeds.
Yeah.
They'll go knock on this door. Hey, the grants. It's not going to cost you anything. We're going to design it. Sign here.
So to that point, before we go trying to add ways or add reasons for people to have to upgrade, we have a lot of work to do with outreach with what we currently have, because there is a huge disconnect between us, because we talk about this at day in and day out, and the general public. I mean, we have a language barrier out here. There's many residences that have failing septics that they don't know that there's funding available simply because they haven't heard it told to them in a way that they can understand. We just had a system right on the bay that was failing, and I had a resident reach out to me and say, my neighbor's septic has been overflowing, it's open, they've got all these issues. We had a Spanish-speaking code enforcement officer go there and explain the program to him. The system's since been replaced. So not only that, there's a lot of misinformation about the older systems and the maintenance costs, and there's people that are literally pumping their septics, once a month, but that's a known cost to them. This is the unknown, and what's it going to cost me year in and year out? They hear electric and they go, oh my gosh, and now more electric.
The electric is one light bulb.
We know that, but the general public doesn't understand this.
Point taken.
And we also have a lot of work to do on our end with getting these inspections and permitting done in a timely fashion because, people want to get, and things are taking a long time.
I will say, I want to concur with the fact that there is a lack of public awareness. Even when I worked in the Suffolk County Legislature, there was a lack of public awareness on it, and I know this has been, how do we enhance this? But I also do want to say, too, that Peconic Estuary Partnership is working on ways of broadening outreach. I know other organizations may be working on that as well to partner with them.
They're coordinating.
Let me finish. I do think what they are trying to hone in on is how to target the communities using some of our existing GIS data in particular. So we need to also be of assistance to provide ways for groups to reach out to various neighborhoods and community folks to provide that information, put it in their mailboxes, put it in front of them so that they have it right there. And the PEP is working on that.
But I think that it needs to be broader. It needs to be like a state and county, full on messaging, branding that, this is something you see when you're watching YouTube videos or, and it's just constantly in your face and it makes you really aware of it right now.
There was a legitimate fear early on that if everybody knew and everybody showed up on the county's doorstep, many people would be disappointed because the money wasn't there.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so we kind of did hold, in a sense, doing what we might normally do. For example, the campaign that we ran to try to get people out for the vote, that was a big campaign. And I think it worked.
If everybody that voted.
Right. And but there was this issue about the county sort of, having money, not having money, you get waylaid, then the town, so that's cleared though. Now they're basically, what the revenue stream is going to be. They know what they're going to be managing. They're bringing more staff on. Yeah. And so all of those pieces are in place, which then allow us to push harder to get the message out so people can show up and not be disappointed.
So we have to be like, we know by Anderson.
Not only that, but people don't even understand simple things like that. The town funding can help you restore your landscaping. And, they think that I'm going to have this hole in my yard that I have to pay and hire a landscaper. They don't understand that money is there also. So.
Well, I take your point entirely, and I forgot Bob was absolutely right. Part of our challenge was we did not want to have such an aggressive education campaign that everybody's system to intake request was blown up, right? Because then you have a different problem. But that's sort of what the beginning of a new program looks like. And we've all come to the conclusion, with humility and hopefully with your concurrence, that it's now time to say, let's scale this up and do it in a coordinated way so you have the systems in place so that if there's an ad campaign about how to avail yourself to the program and we have the equivalent of a concierge service where somebody who calls up and listen, nobody should ever go through this more than once in their life, right? And if you're really lucky, that's about all it is. But it's people know how to buy washing machines and they think they know how to buy cars because somebody in our family has done this. It's a fairly unique skill set, right? And you have to trust the process that you're working with and the people you're working with to get it done. So you're spending taxpayers' money. You want to do that efficiently and smartly and wisely. And you want to be sure the public gets what they were promised, right? So there's a heavy responsibility, and none of this is said lightly, right? But it surely can be done, right? So, I'm happy to look into what does a campaign for enhanced participation look like, and what are the incentives, and what are the easier ways to do this going forward.
I mean, as the former chair of the Hampton-based CAC, you know more than most how hard it is to change people's perception on things. So.
I'm still recovering from that PTSD experience. So the other thing is, and then you need to know too. We're mostly talking about the residential, but the in the committee that the supervisor and I are on, there's a discussion about how do you set up a program that is friendly for business, right? Communities, downtowns, areas that will never have a sewer, they still have needs. How do you address that? So that's being discussed also, and that would be in perhaps the next phase. And I don't mean phase out in the decade, sometime sooner. So the sooner we start dealing with these issues, the faster everything gets implemented, the sooner we start seeing water quality improvements. And then, one day Chris Gobler will come here and say, you know what?
Got a new map.
Historically, this was a terrible place. We don't have that anymore because of the work that was done. And that'll be a really great presentation by Chris Gobler.
We did get a spreadsheet from our department, the water quality department, that showed that the timing really isn't as dire as some people were making us think. There were a couple of handfuls of contractors that had to wait quite a while because of different issues involved. But for the most part, it seems to be working pretty well, the reimbursements.
Right? It's great.
I think what we have to do on that is have the contractors tell the people exactly what it's going to cost, and if they know it's going to cost them very little, they can get the funding to the town. At the end of the day, it's not going to cost them anything at all, just inconvenience for a few weeks while the system is being put in.
Yeah.
I think that's what you have to drive.
Chris wants to speak. Go ahead.
Just, on the cost front, just two things real quick. I mean, one, just back to Walt's math, if you didn't see it, but if this new bill is signed by the governor, people in the town of Southampton can get $65,000 up to replace their system. In almost every case, that's not just replacing the system, but full restoration, to probably even better than you had. So that's amazing. And then just one other point, the idea of transfer of property came up. When people buy a home in the town of Southampton, they're paying 2% into the CPF. If they don't upgrade their system, they never see that again. It just goes into the pot. This is not that it would be a direct turnaround, but here's an opportunity where you're paying 2% in.
Right.
You're actually getting an infrastructure upgrade for your home for that not directly, but technically you're getting something for paying that
back.
fee.
And that's what we have to tell the people.
Yeah, so I think those are two. And if you're on the public outreach fund, if it's property transfer, you're not, instead of paying that money and never seeing it again, you're paying that money and you actually get something for your home for it.
We're all on the same side who want to get this done to protect the groundwater from it. What we worked on with the sand mines all the way down.
Are there any other municipalities besides the example you mentioned in Massachusetts that do the on-transfer requirement?
In January of this year, I think the town of Wellfleet went to a 2-year post closing. You have to get the system, and they don't have hardly any money. I think they have a couple of small grants. But if you're familiar with Wellfleet,
On the Cape, you're saying? Yeah.
it's basically a sandbar. So every place is draining into somewhere. But that's that's undertaken. The town of Shelter Island is also looking at something that they're in the process of their comprehensive plan update, and they've been sort of looking at some kind of they don't have it finalized, but they've looked at that. I think there's been some discussion in the village of East Hampton also.
The other thing that did happen in the earlier phase period was we had people hosting trainings with architects, engineers, and we tried to have the septic waste industry people get access to sort of presentations on this is a new business opportunity, different than your more narrow, limited business opportunity. And I could see that the town, or in combination with other towns, offering continuing credits to the architect and engineer community in a forum here or someplace else where you're just continuing to let people know the program is out there. So when a homeowner contacts architect or somebody else, and they say, listen, you have to do this. Here's all the reasons why, and why wouldn't you, right? So it's expanding and working in, sometimes when the regulated community, you wait for somebody to come in and you tell them that they conform and they don't. This is different. This is, reaching out to them and saying, we need your help because you have contact with all these people about how, you can help us achieve collectively what everybody continues to say they want: cleaner water, healthier bays and harbors. And that's what this whole effort is about. I know you know that, and we appreciate you giving us the time on your Friday where it's almost sunny out.
Yeah, I mean, something else that we actually should look at is when somebody asks for a rental permit, and then you're using your property to make money, it should be something
excellent.
you should have to think about.
No, great idea.
I think people maybe weren't as trusting when the program first started up, because who even heard of this and how do they work? And then I think that some of the systems weren't as effective as originally we'd hoped. But now, isn't there something new that was created with the wood chips? I mean, how do people know which system is best, and where's the technology now?
I mean, the happy news that the county has an incredibly rigorous testing program. So technically, the finally approved systems had to have been tested for 3 years. And they publish all their data and the costs as well. So, I mean, the county is the sort of the gatekeeper and the regulators.
Yeah, there are several there are different systems, and the county will make that determination when they, when they go there to just investigate and.
Yeah.
But they don't all, treat to the same level, right?
Correct. And so the nitrogen reducing biofilters at Center for Clean Water Technology at Stony Brook have gotten the lowest effluent and remove other contaminants as well.
Has that been ultimately approved now?
They're both, two different systems are at the provisionally approved stage, yes.
But were you also looking at a polishing system after the IA system?
As well.
Would that be covered with this grant funding?
Why not? Right, that's
If
part
that's
of
something
it.
that people that already have an IA system want to add that?
Yeah.
Would
And
that
once
be
it gets
covered?
approved, right? It's just preliminarily approved, you said?
The wood chip box polishing unit has been approved by the health department. There's an engineering polishing unit that can be added. They don't allow it right now to give you credit to hit 19, but if you have an approved IA system that already meets 19 parts per million nitrogen, you can add this wood chip box. And I think it's fair to state that the goal is well under 10, probably closer to 3 to 5 parts per million.
At some point, it's probably going to be the reset part.
So I just want to make a point. Massachusetts has recently set their number at 10, which is kind of interesting. We modeled our number at 19 in Suffolk County because that was a Massachusetts number. It was the most stringent. Massachusetts has now set a best available technology goal of 10 milligrams per liter, which is basically consistent with the New York State speedies and groundwater drinking water standards. So I can't say what's going to happen in Suffolk County for sure, but I think that this wood chip box is going to be one of the means by which this potentially could be attained countywide.
Still at
We can get it
19?
down to 10.
So
Still at 19 now.
right now, the two systems that have the lion's share of the marketplace are the two systems that are getting probably the best overall average results, that 11 and 12 milligrams per liter of nitrogen. And in my case, I have a drain field, so I expect it's somewhere like single digits, probably 5 or 6. So that's really good. But over time, I expect the systems to get operated easier with better polishing and lower average numbers over time, which is how a system's supposed to improve, right? And then what have we done if that happens? So we gave the public what they told you guys all to do.
We take in about $11 million a year in the water quality, and we always set aside $3 million for the IA systems. But we do like to reserve some for our own, projects that we're doing, and for the community when they come to us for grant money. So, but I think we do. I'd have to check whether we give out all of the $3 million each year.
That number likely grows over time.
Yeah, there's years we've added, I think, money actually.
I don't think we did the 3 million this past year.
Yeah, we didn't. We didn't give it all out.
Because you were talking about if it rolls over or not.
So we
It does roll over, I think.
I think so, yes.
we it's approaching 11:30. We could have Chris and Bob and Walt could have this conversation all day if you'll stick around. And we look forward to whatever follow through any of you are so inclined to have. But we're going to do this. We have to. We're doing it anyway, and you and I and that other committee, right? So it continues, and we just thought it would be more coherent if it was intentional and coordinated.
Yeah.
And we look forward to your continued help. We thank you for having us.
Well, we're certainly gonna talk about it some more, and we'll meet with our CPF director. She couldn't be here today, but we'll look at, what the money is and what's available. I know her concern is that if we open it up to all properties and start marketing, that people will come, we won't have the money for them.
That's always a concern. If
That's
the
the worst
marketing campaign is too successful, everybody calls you up and says, I applied for a grant, what do you mean I can't get it? Right? We get that. So it's all about chicken and egg, what comes first? I think you have to have the program first before you have the advertising.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Very informative.
guys.
Everybody have a nice weekend.
Great to see you all again.
Fred, thank you, man.
Could we get
Thank
Fred.
you.
slides at some
Sure.
point too?
I already sent them to Janice. Janice has them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. She's welcome to share.
Thank you.
Good seeing you. How's life?
All right. Thanks for all you do.
Yeah, part-time. It's a good cause.
Good seeing you, Fred.
Good to see you guys. Talk soon.
All right, Fred.
All right, well, we've got some thinking to do. That brings us to our supervisor and town council member liaison updates. Rick, why don't you get us started this week?
The 4th of July parade, I drove, not marched. I actually drove some of my fellow Kiwanians who were sharing the time with the Key Club and the K Kids in the parade. It was a lot of fun. I've never, all the times I've done it, I've never seen people 5 deep, and how many people were there. It was really enthusiastic to see everybody that was actually there. And it was a good turnout, I thought. There was a lot of floats. I heard a lot of comments about maybe this time we shorten it, because there was so many floats and so many people. But it was really great to see everybody out there.
And Robert Ross was the Grand Marshal?
Yes.
How nice for him.
Yeah, Robert's great. It was great that we got to honor him the other day also.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many good stories that go above and beyond his official duties, things that he's done in the community. So it's wonderful. I hope he actually relaxes a little bit, but I did tell him that I was not getting rid of his phone number because he had more contacts than all of us put together. So if we need anything, we could still call him. We did have a Hampton Bays Civic meeting last week. Michael and I were there. Bill was there. Hampton Bays has a pretty good. He calls us in on different things to speak about. So he usually gets, all of us. But they
I
are.
know he had the Parks Department come in, and then he had, public safety come in.
Well, Kristen did a wonderful job. Kristen, when you really figure out all her duties and her year-round responsibilities, how many employees she has under her, all the parks, all the beaches, the garbage, and everything else that the programming, equipment, repairs. It's a tremendous position that she does without any fanfare, without bothering us a lot. We don't get a lot of asks. So her talking to the public, they were, I think, mesmerized by the amount of responsibility she had. So the follow-up questions weren't a lot. I know after the 4th of July weekend, we had overflowed garbage cans and simple things like that. But, there was nothing really tremendous, on her plate that people were complaining about. It surprises me how few people realize how many parks they actually have around them and what they have to take care of. But again, she handled herself wonderfully, and people were in awe of her presentation. So we also did give out a proclamation, but I'll let Michael speak about that.
Thank you.
And actually, I think a lot of people in Hampton Bays were surprised how much support they have from us, from this board.
Yeah,
They were
people
saying
People only realize a couple $1 million was put into Red Creek Park. Red Creek Park was built on a shoestring 35 years ago. And the amount of money that the board has put into it, they've redone the ball fields, basketball courts, ADA compliance for everybody there. We usually have our affirmative picnic there, and it's tough for some people to get up to the bathrooms. Now it won't be because she's corrected everything that was difficult.
And the animal shelter and how quick we respond to, they had a couple of complaints about properties with animals and this and that. Between all of us and Michael, we were right on top of it.
Great.
And they were really surprised. We did have a small fire in West Hampton transfer station. Someone threw cardboard boxes with ashes in it. So I'm trying to, tell people to be careful what they throw off because it could have cost the town a lot of money replacing equipment.
Yeah.
Plus the inconvenient a lot of people who goes and throw garbage out on a weekend that we had to close it for a little bit.
Yeah.
To make sure it was safe and the fire was out and there was nothing explosive in that container.
Thankfully, it wasn't bad, but as you said, it could have been worse.
It could have been a lot
We'll
worse.
need to be more careful.
And people have to realize what they're throwing out, what's recyclable and what's not recyclable, because we're trying to give all the transfer stations an uplift so it's easier for the people to use and more friendly to the environment, especially to the groundwater.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, thank you.
return.
Let's see, as Kevin mentioned, there was a meeting of the Suffolk County Water Quality Restoration Fund Board of Trustees yesterday. And what we're working on now is different organizations appointed different people. Like the Eastern Supervisors appointed somebody, and Pine Barrens appointed me. But anyway, there's a lot of people there, and right now we're working on a scoring rubric to, see which projects should be receiving grant funding. Half the money's going to go to sewer plans and half to the IA systems. And I think the number was a little high. It looks like it's really going to be about $3 million a month, maybe 40 million. I don't know if I just said million or thousand, but million a year. But how do you score them? Which are in the most sensitive areas? Which are further along in the planning. So that's what we're working on now is the scoring rubric. And then also yesterday, there was the Long Island Association hosted the 5 East End Supervisors, which was really fun. It was a lot of people showed up and they asked us questions and about how we all work together and what are our regional concerns and what's great about our own towns. And so it was fun to interact with a lot of people yesterday. That's what I have, Micah.
Thank you. As Rick was saying, joined Rick and Bill at the Hampton-based Civic, and we did give a certificate to the Southampton Animal Shelter for all their work. Chris Teakle was there, explained a lot of their programming. Yeah, it's very good. I just want to do a quick plug for Chris. He's really been working really hard, going into the community, meeting people where they are, and really representing the animal shelter with a lot of pride. And I think that's really good. And he understands the importance of the partnership between the town and the shelter organization. And they talked about their fostering program.
Don't forget about the turkeys trying to find a home for.
Yeah. Yes, they do have turkeys.
Not turkey, a rooster.
Rooster.
Trying to find a home for a rooster.
Yeah, they have a lot of different animals. They have bunnies, and they talked about all the different things that they have. But as you know, they're in a couple of months they're going to be undergoing renovations, so they do have a fostering program. So if people are able to help the shelter and adopt an animal for just a short period of time, as they go through this process, will be really helpful as they make that transition.
I think I heard that they have placement for all the dogs.
Yes, they do. They're actually working with Bite Away and some other organizations, and they're helping out. So really great to see the community support for them.
Terrific.
Yeah, and again, plug for Chris Teakle. He's been really working really hard, and also the volunteers and staff who really just dedicate so much time and effort to making sure the shelter runs well. I attended the Noyak Civic meeting last night with our Highway Superintendent, Charlie McCardle. There were a lot of people that showed up who advocated for traffic safety initiatives and furthering what we've been doing. There were some comments that were made about the new stop signs at the Serene Green location and also the Long Beach location. Charlie took all of those comments in and is going to try to assess what we can do to even make them better. We're also thinking about revisiting advocating for the traffic circle over there at Long Beach and Noyak. Charlie and I are going to be working on that. And I just want to thank Charlie for taking all those questions. I mean, there were a lot of people who were there, and the people were really happy to just see how much work we've done in a year's time. And I do want to thank this board for all your support in some of those initiatives. We procured speed monitors. We've done legislation for stop signs and other things. Bill, I know you in particular have been very helpful, but I just want to thank the board members and my colleagues here for helping. Noyak is very happy about how fast we've responded to some of those matters.
Not to mention the paving.
The repaving, yeah, all of it. Yeah, they're very happy.
It shows when a board works together, we can get things done.
Yeah, it was really good. Also, just want to make mention two things that the first-time home buyers class that I discussed at the last work session got postponed to October 25th. Rick and I have been working with our housing department, Kara and Jamie. Jamie's been doing a great job getting that together. So October 25th is when that's going to happen. And eventually the second annual Disability Resources Fair is going to be announced very soon, so I will provide that information at our next meeting. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Michael.
I think you guys pretty much covered everything. I also marched in the parade this past 4th. It was a great day, and I think it's the mayor of Southampton's favorite day of the year, and he reminds me of like Ebenezer Scrooge when he comes out on Christmas Day and he's running through the streets and he's all excited. But it was a really fun parade, and it's just great to see everyone from the community out. And it was funny because I used to watch the parade and I knew everybody on the sidelines, and now I know pretty much no one who's watching the parade because it seems to be more, summer residents that come out to enjoy the parade. But I take about an hour before the parade and go backwards through the line, and I know just about everybody in the parade or their kids. So it's definitely changed, but it's always a great community event, and I ask if anybody can help them out with some support. They are looking for funding to keep the parade going. I also wanted to bring up, as far as fundraising goes, tonight at 7 p.m. at Cooper's Beach is the Moonlit Plunge for Heart of the Hamptons. And I think that's about all I have. I met with Kristen Doulos. We talked about some capital projects, and to your point, she does an amazing job, and she really is, just so careful with taxpayer funding, and she's always looking for grant funding anywhere she can to do things, without asking for more money. And they really do a great job. I actually met with her and John Irwin yesterday about some maintenance issues, and they do a fantastic job. And we don't even realize the amount. It's not just the parks. It's, they mow the grass at Town Hall and all of our facilities, and even around the signs at Mana on the Lobster Inn, they mow that. I mean, things that you don't even imagine that they have to do with all the CPF properties that we have now is, and they were saying it's starting to get, they're at that point where we really need to start thinking about potentially asking if something can be changed, that CPF money can, at least a small portion of it could be used for maintenance, because that's what I hear from the community a lot. I don't know about all of you, but we have all these communities, all these properties, and people would like to see them not developed, not, made into parks, just maintained better. And Parks does an amazing job with what they have and in the budget they have and the staffing that they have. But if we could put a little bit more into it for, some extra help for them to get it done, it would be great. So
yeah, I think the changes that just got made allow for maintenance, but it has to be a capital project type of improvement. So the regular day-to-day is something we do need to look at.
Just the huge thing right now is the pine beetle and removing all those trees, and their budget just doesn't, it doesn't allow for it. So it becomes a taxpayer expense. So
it includes, a lot of the properties we purchase on the water, and it's to preserve the view shed. And 5 years down the road, we can't
There's no
see the
view
water
shed, yeah.
anymore because we don't take care of the property. So
Exactly.
things like that, I think, have to be incorporated into that budget.
Yeah, those are really good points. Jackie just reminded me that on July 14th, there's an emergency preparedness seminar here at Town Hall, or you can join online to understand emergency weather alerts, know your evacuation zones, local shelters, get the facts on how emergency support is activated, and hear from Suffolk County Emergency Services and Southampton Town officials. So get onto our website to get the details on that.
Yeah, and tonight is week 2 of the Good Ground Park concert series.
Are you going?
I'm going to try. I have something else to do. I usually take at least 1 week where I go up and speak and thank Kristen and Daryl and everybody for what they do in the park, and everybody gives them a good round of applause. So I want to try to do that. I don't know if it's tonight, but it is Noise, the band, tonight. It should be a good time.
Oh, yeah.
And sadly, East Quogue Summer Concert Series started 2 weeks ago, and they are 0 for 2 so far because of rain.
Oh,
so
no. Do they have a
They
rain
have to.
date?
They had to add another rain date, so their first 2 dates are now into the end of July and the beginning of August. So
You should have the best drummers come and Psychophonic and play him.
And the West Hampton Beach at the Village Green every Wednesday night, they have their concerts too. And a lot of it sounds like the same bands are
Going back and forth.
taking turns
Which is
playing.
good.
Yeah. All right, well, if no one else has any other comments, then I move to go into executive session to discuss confidential legal advice, personnel, and contracts, and then close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.